This is a mod that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Upgrade the rear sprocket on one of my bikes. This is from my Triumph Daytona 955i, and I thought that that bike was the perfect candidate for this mod, mainly because it's producing a load of juicy power right at the top end of the rev range, but it's quite hard to access on everyday roads, so I wanted a little bit more punch in the mid to lower range RPMs. This mod, hopefully, will do that. This stock sprocket is 42 teeth, whereas the one that I've got is 45 teeth, so we are gearing it down, gearing it a little bit shorter. So hopefully this is going to give us a little bit more torque in the lower end RPMs at the sacrifice or at the cost of top speed. But to be honest with you, top speed on a bike like that really isn't a big deal on everyday roads. I prefer torque over top speed. I take that any day of the week. Now, this video isn't going to be a how-to or tutorial. There's plenty of fantastic resources online. I'll leave some in the video description if this is a job that you want to do yourselves, but no, we're going to be going over it in brief, but this is mainly going to be about what the effect is of doing a mod like this yourselves. If this is something that you wanted to do, how different is it going to feel? But anyway, let's crack on and get started. So to do this job, of course, you are going to have to pick up the bike onto some paddock stands. I've got a front paddock stand here, and I've also got a single swing-arm paddock stand. But unfortunately, in order to get the rear sprocket off the bike, you are going to have to jack it up in the middle. I've got my jack just under the rear shock, so it's a little bit hairy. It's not the most stable in the world, but unfortunately, with the tools that I've got, this was the only way to do it. To be fair, it did lift the bike up pretty well, and I was able to take the rear paddock stand off to do the rest of this build. So to loosen the chain, you are going to have to undo a bolt that is kind of in between the wheel hub and the wheel itself. This will allow you to turn a cog, which again is kind of mashed in between the wheel hub and the wheel, but it's almost like a suspension cog. It kind of looks a little bit like that, so I thought the best tool to try and loosen the suspension would be with a suspension or rear shock tool. And unfortunately, I had 3 on hand. 2 of them didn't really work. They weren't able to get enough bite onto the cog to turn it. But the third one that I had was one that I bought for my ZH2, and it's a little hook. I'll leave that linked in the video description if that's a tool that you think you're going to want for this kind of job, but it's just what I had on hand. So to loosen the chain, you are going to have to turn the cog clockwise. It's kind of a little bit backwards to how I would have expected, but yeah, you turn it clockwise to loosen the chain, you turn it anti-clockwise to tighten the chain. So at this point, I wasn't really able to loosen the chain enough to take it off the bike, because I really didn't want to have to break the chain. Ideally, I wanted to reuse this chain if I could. But I did try to take off the front cover of the front sprocket to see if there was enough wiggle room there to get the chain off. Unfortunately, there wasn't in the end. I did try taking off the mudguard as well to see if I could get some better access, but in the end, I did have to use a chain braking tool. And I'll tell you what, getting this mudguard off of the Daytona was an absolute nightmare. I probably spent about an hour to an hour and a half trying to get the damn thing off, and in the end, I just loosened it and just left it there, worked around it. So once I figured out that I had to break the chain loose, there wasn't any other way. Unfortunately, you are going to have to use an angle grinder for the kit that I had. It is a heavy duty kit, but they do recommend using an angle grinder to grind off the tip of the pin first before you push it through. There are more heavy duty tools that you can use. I probably would have preferred to have gotten one of those in the end, but this tool worked plenty well enough to break the chain. But pretty much once you've ground down the pin so it's flat or flush with the chain, you can at that point use the chain splitting tool. I mean, we're not going to go into too much detail here about how this is used, but pretty much you're going to clamp down with the tool, and then inside the core there's like a push pin if you like, and that's what you use to drive the pins out. It is going to feel quite tight, but it does get to a point where it really loosens off. So if that does happen, then you know that you've split the chain properly. If it continues to tighten and it's not getting any easier, then you probably haven't lined up the tool properly. So pretty much at this point, as soon as the chain has been split, it was just a case of pulling it through and the chain just came right off. So at this point, I was pretty much ready to take off the old sprocket. There were 6 nuts that I had to undo, but on the other side there is a bolt that goes through, and if you undo it without anything holding onto the other side, it will just spin the hole. So I used a screwdriver, but you can use an Allen key. if you like, to hold the bolt in place whilst you undo the nuts. So just whilst I was messing around with the chain, I didn't really want the bike falling over, so I did decide to put it back on a paddock stand for this next bit. But now that the sprocket is ready to come off, I got the jack stand underneath it, and the rear sprocket just came right off easy enough. So pretty much at this point, we're ready to put on the new sprocket and do the whole process again in reverse. So I just attached the new sprocket, put the bolts through, attach the nuts. I quickly just buzzed them on with the gun just to get the sprocket on there, but then I properly tighten them down afterwards. It's up to you if you want to torque this. I didn't, but there's going to be some information online about how much torque you probably should apply to the bolts. I just went until I thought they were tight enough. To be honest with you, you don't have to tighten these down an awful lot. And if you want a little bit of extra security, then by all means, get a little bit of Loctite on the bolts. That gives you a little bit of peace of mind as well. I really did want to use the old chain because, to be honest with you, this isn't a motorcycle that I need for longevity. This was just a weekend toy. This is an experiment bike. So I really didn't care. Usually you are supposed to replace everything together at the same time. The chain, the rear sprocket, and the front sprocket, because they'll wear together pretty much. If you get this new stuff and you just bolt them on willy-nilly, just one thing at a time, you're not going to get as much life out of the chain or the sprockets. But for me, it wasn't really a big deal. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to use my old 106 link chain. It simply just wasn't big enough. So maybe if you're changing out the front sprocket as well, then maybe that would have worked if you take a tooth off. But in the end, I just bought a new chain, which was 108 links. So for 45 teeth on the rear and 18 teeth on the front, 108 links is where you need to be. So running the new chain through was pretty straightforward, but there was a bit of an issue with the master link. Now this chain came with a clip master link. I personally would have preferred a riveted one, but it's just what I had on hand, so I thought, well, sod it, I'll just go ahead and use that. But the issue is that as I was clamping down, the master link is supposed to clamp as you're pushing the pieces together, but this one just slides up and down. There's nothing really holding it once you clamp it, so every single time whenever I clamp, it would just loosen again. So it was very difficult getting the clip on. But in the end, I was able to, I managed to clamp and push the clip down enough so it would hold in place. But maybe at some point in the near future, I'll replace this with a riveted link instead. So this process took me the best part of a couple of afternoons to do. It was a little bit frustrating, mainly just trying to loosen and tighten the chain. I'm sure if there's a perfect tool for it out there, I'm just working with what I've got. I even tried using just a screwdriver and a hammer, because you can do that with suspension, with rear shocks. You can just hammer the locking cog with a hammer and screwdriver. Usually that's enough to loosen it. So I did try that here, but unfortunately it didn't really work. Luckily though, as much as it's a pain trying to loosen a chain that way, you don't have to turn it that much to loosen or tighten the chain. In the end, I did actually tighten the chain a little bit too much, because as you'll probably know, when the bike is on a stand of some kind, there's not going to be as much tension on the chain. As soon as you sit down on the bike, the chain stretches. So you do have to account for that a little bit. So I just backed it off a little bit and then tightened it down, and it was perfectly fine. But pretty much all you have to do at the end is just tighten down that bolt that you loosened right at the very beginning to hold the tension of the chain in place. In my attempts to take off the mudguard, I did take off the chain guard and also the left foot peg as well. I don't know how you are supposed to get that mudguard off, but I'm guessing you have to undo the brake line. That's the only way that I think you could do it, but I really didn't want to do that. It was going to be an absolute pain just to get the chain off. So in the end, I thought it was just easier just to split the chain. At one point, I didn't think the rear sprocket would actually fit around the chain guard, but luckily, yeah, it's okay. There is enough clearance for this, so it's not really an issue. But if I had to, I would have removed the chain guard as well. It's not exactly a vital thing, but the way how it's molded to the rear mudguard. So again, to try and take that off, you're going to have to undo the rear brake line. There's no other way that I could see that you could take that mudguard off, because I don't know why Triumph designed it like this. It's a little bit annoying. Really, ideally, they should have had a mudguard and chain guard separately, so you could take one off without having to take off the other, but it's just the way it is. So if this is something that concerns you, if you are getting an even bigger rear sprocket, then yeah, you might have to take off the mudguard and pretty much leave it off. If that's what you're going to do, you could potentially just break it. It's plastic, so it's not really that difficult to break, but I don't like breaking things if I can help it, so that's why I just ended up leaving it as it is. And luckily it ended up working okay with the new sprocket, so it wasn't a big deal. And now finally it's time. Let's see if all the work and effort that went into putting on this new rear sprocket was worth it. Let's jump on and let's find out. And here is the finished product, everybody. The Daytona here, I've been riding her for about a couple of weeks now with the new rear sprocket setup, and I have to say I'm quite impressed overall with the outcome. It's quite subtle, but I think it's actually perfect. But yeah, let's take her up for a ride and let's show you what she's like. Battery's running a bit low on the Daytona. Alright. It's really interesting because, yeah, first impressions were actually that it didn't seem to make that much of a difference in the overall feel of the bike, which I was a little bit surprised about at the time. But yeah, I think this is better in a lot of ways. So I mean, first gear we used to get, I think it was about 75 mile an hour topping out first gear. I'm not sure if we'll get an opportunity down here to test out what this is now, but I've measured it at about 65 or so. I think just there I saw on the speedo it was about 66 there, and that was, yeah, right at 11,500 RPM, just when the red line kicks in. So it could probably get up to about 70 mile an hour still in first gear with this new setup, which is still pretty good. I mean, if I can get 0 to 62 in first gear on a motorcycle, I'm quite happy. I appreciate that quite a lot. But yeah, the overall feel actually isn't too different to how it was before. It's only really when you start putting the power down is when you really do start understanding where the differences are. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed at first. This is the bike that is always a little bit disappointing at first, and then after a little while of riding it, then you realise how much fun it is. It's happened again. But yeah, it is really good actually, because you're not missing out too much on the stock performance of the bike, but of course because you're gearing it down you are getting a lower top speed, but you are getting a nice little bump in torque. Now I didn't want to do the front sprocket. A lot of people would probably say, well, just take a tooth take a tooth off the front sprocket and you'll probably have the same kind of feel. And yes, even though that is the case, I thought this would be a little bit easier. And to be honest with you, trying to get that nut off that front sprocket on this bike, I did try it to try and get the old chain off originally. It was a no-go, really. It was very difficult to do, and I don't have an air gun or anything like that, an air hammer, to try and get it off. So I left that in the end, but that is another way that you could have done it. So instead of 18 on the front, you could have 17 on the front. And quite a common combination is 17-45, so the 45 tooth rear sprocket, 17 on the front sprocket. But I just wanted to keep things as simple as possible and to be honest, I wanted to use all the stuff I already had. I wanted to use my old chain, I wanted to use my old front sprocket, because I don't really care. I don't need this bike to have a long life for me. Yes, of course I want to look after it, but things like that I don't think really matter in the short term anyway. So I won't be keeping this bike for that much longer. I don't know, we'll see. But currently, yeah, but it's just, yeah, it doesn't, to me it doesn't matter. Right? If you want the most life out of your chain and your sprockets, then yes, you should change them all together at the same time so they all wear together. But in this situation, on this bike, it wasn't necessary. But I'll tell you what, this thing absolutely loves to wheelie now. Picking up that front wheel is very, very easy. Second gear kind of feels like first gear now, or how it used to. It's so funny. But there is so much more bite now than there used to be, especially when you're twisting that throttle back. When you're riding it casually, when you're riding it normally, not a lot has changed. But when you want to start opening the taps a bit, when you want to have some fun, see, that's third gear, man. There's so much bite in third gear. It's mad. I imagine that the 0 to 60 has gone down a little bit as well on this bike from what it was before. I don't know. 0 to 60 was probably about, what, 3.5 seconds or so. So yeah, probably for me about 3.5 seconds. So it would be interesting one day to do a 0 to 60 run again on this bike and see just how much time I've been able to shave off first gear. But I mean, this bike doesn't have any wheelie control or anything like that, so yeah, if you are too hard on that throttle, then it's going to be quite difficult to keep that front end on the ground, and that's what you want. When you want that straight line speed as fast as you can, you got to keep that front end down. That's the only way to get the quickest top speeds. But look, I want a little bit more torque. I've got a little bit more torque. There you guys, picking up the front end is a little bit easier than it was before, which is exactly what I was looking for. I mean, in second gear, I haven't tried so much in second gear, but if it feels like first gear, then yeah, it's going to pick up that front end, but probably in the last 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. But it has made it a lot more interesting. Well, not interesting, because the bike was interesting to ride before, very interesting. I mean, different. It has made. It's like a small difference, but at the same time quite noticeable when you're on the throttle. But yeah, it's very, very good, and the bike just feels a little bit more responsive, a little bit more. I mean, I don't know if the throttle response is accurate. The bike's got a bit more throttle response, but it does feel like it's got more punch. Woo! Thing is, like, I get a lot of satisfaction from just like baby wheelies. Like, I don't feel like I need to pick up that front end that much, you know, to have a good time. It still feels well within my control, if you know what I mean, just doing them throttle ups. And I'm not very good at wheelies. I'm trying to get more confident. I'm trying to practice, just you know, because I think they're cool. All right, yeah, sue me. Yeah, I think they're cool, and I want to know how they're done. All right, whether it's just with the throttle or if it's with the clutch, either way, I don't care. But pairing out the corners, pairing out the bends is nice. I get a little bit more punch now than I used to, which is amazing. All in all, you guys, I think this is a worthwhile upgrade. It was a little bit of a pain, and the edit does make it look a lot easier than it actually was. I mean, initially I actually ended up getting the wrong rear sprocket. It didn't fit around the hub, so you do have to be careful what you're buying, but I'm in the process of returning that one now anyway. So but yeah, the second one that I got fit absolutely fine, and the chain braking was a little bit of a pain as well. I think I would have preferred getting one of those chain breakers that can just push the pins out without you having to grind down the pin first, because the set that I got just basically isn't strong enough. It would break the tool pretty much if I tried pushing the pin through just as it was before, like without grinding the head of the pin off. It just would have broken the tool. So maybe in future I'll look at getting one of the more heavy duty ones, because then it means that if I want to do this in future, I don't need an angle grinder. And like, to do this yourselves at home, to need to have an angle grinder is a little bit, you know, I mean, yeah, some people have them at home, but most people don't have angle grinders at home. So then it would be a case of having to buy the chain braking set plus buying an angle grinder, it would be quite a lot of extra tools that you would need to buy just to change the rear sprocket on this bike. Well, at least if you are going to need a new chain anyway, like I did. But yeah, guys, all in all, a hell of a lot of fun with this bike. It has certainly made the ride different and interesting, more interesting than it was before. I think maybe a little bit. But is this a worthwhile upgrade? Yes, I think it is, but only if you have the tools. Like, a chain braking kit is going to cost you about 50 quid on its own. Maybe a little bit more than that. If you're getting a heavy duty one especially, it will probably cost you closer to 60, 70, 80 quid for a heavy duty one. But if you do have an angle grinder at home, then you can save a little bit of money and get one of the cheap ones, if you like. And that would, you know, that would do the job, certainly. But that's probably the hardest bit about all this, is being able to break the chain, because I was hoping that I'd be able to back the chain off enough, loosen it enough that I'd be able to get it off the rear sprocket without having to break it. But unfortunately that ended up not being the case, just because the way how the tightening and the loosening mechanism works on this bike, there just simply isn't really enough room to do that. So whatever way you're going to do this on this 955i, maybe even a Sprint 955i as well, or a Tiger. Did they have a Tiger 955i? I can't remember. But all the 955i models with this same swing arm design, you might not be able to back the chain off enough to get it off the sprocket whole. You will more than likely have to break it, split it. One other thing is that I'm not happy with the whole clip master link on the chain either. At some point or other, I might have to invest in a riveted master link, just because they're a little bit more secure. And the one that I had, the one that came with the chain, it wouldn't press fit down, if you know what I mean. So getting on the clip was actually quite difficult, and from videos that I've seen, it shouldn't be that difficult. So I might take that off and do it again at some point with a proper riveted master link. But I don't know, we'll see. That's just the one that came with the chain. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the narration already or not, because I haven't actually like recorded the narration. But it is a 108 link chain is what you're going to need for this mod, and I'm guessing that's the same as well if you want to do a 17 tooth on the front, 45 on the rear as well. I'm guessing that's what you're going to need. But yeah, I've heard that there are issues, there are problems doing that. I don't know what they are exactly, but that's a dune buggy, I've just realised. How funny is that? It's using a Beetle chassis, isn't it, that, or something along those lines. Anyway, yeah, I've heard some issues. I can't remember what issues they are from changing the front sprocket from 18 to 17, taking a tooth off. But on the rear, it should be absolutely fine doing that, going up 45. The thing is, if you go up 43, because the stock is 42, if you go up to 43 or maybe even 44, you're not necessarily going to feel that much of a difference. So I would recommend 45 on the rear if this is an upgrade that you want to do. But if you want a little bit more, I mean, not on a bike like this, but if you want a little bit more fuel economy, then you can gear it up. So you have a smaller rear sprocket with less teeth. Then you're going to get a higher top speed, and your cruising speed is going to be much easier on the bike. Your revs aren't going to be quite as high cruising. So, like, you know, if you're going 60 mile an hour, for example, then instead of it being, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 RPM, you'll actually be doing closer to 4,000 RPM. So adding tooth to the front or removing tooth off the rear is going to gear it up, gear it longer, right? So you get longer gears. That's going to decrease performance, the overall feel of the performance of the bike. Not by much, probably, but maybe a little bit, so it's noticeable. But yeah, you'll get better MPG. If you have a Sprint, for example, and that could be a good mod for you as well that way. But yeah, you guys, I mean, all in all, this has been, I think, a worthwhile mod. It has taken a little bit of time for me to understand where the differences are. They're not necessarily immediate, but I'm really happy with the overall feel of the bike. It doesn't feel too different, but at the same time, when you are enjoying yourself on the bike, the difference is quite significant. So yeah, I'm really happy with it, and this video isn't meant to be an instructional one. This is, I mean, yeah, okay, a rough guide, if you like, how to do it, what tools you're going to need and stuff, but there are lots and lots of really good videos out there about how to do this yourselves at home if you wanted to. So I'll try and leave some of them linked that I've seen, but obviously by all means go ahead and do your own research as well. But yeah, all in all, you guys, yes, it was a little bit of a pain, but it wasn't too bad, really. I don't think this job was too bad at all. But you guys let me know what you think down in the comment section below. As always, please go ahead, leave that like if you've enjoyed this ride out today on the awesome Triumph Daytona 955i. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down there. But we really appreciate your support. Thank you ever so much for watching this one. You guys take care, ride safe. We'll catch you all in the next video, everyone. Have a good one.